My name is Claire. I'm 29 years old, and this is the story of how I discovered the man I thought was my forever turned out to be my deepest betrayal. I met Jason at a friend's engagement party. He wasn't the loudest in the room, but somehow my eyes kept finding him. He had this easy smile, the kind that seemed to melt the awkwardness out of the air. When we finally spoke, it felt less like meeting someone new and more like remembering someone I had known all along. Jason was attentive in a way that made me feel seen. He asked about my work, not just what I did, but what I loved about it. He noticed when I wore my favorite earrings, and he remembered tiny details I barely remembered saying. Within weeks, he was picking me up from work, cooking dinners at my apartment, introducing me to his friends, as if I had always been part of his circle. For the first time in years, I let my guard down. My past relationships had taught me to tread carefully, but Jason disarmed me with kindness. He called me his safe place, and I started to believe it. We'd built dreams together quickly, maybe too quickly, but I was caught in the rush. Weekend trips turned into conversations about moving in together. Lazy Sunday mornings turned into whispers about marriage, kids, a life shared. He made me feel like I wasn't just loved, but chosen. My best friend Hannah raised an eyebrow one night after meeting him. "He's charming," she said slowly, "almost too charming. Just promise me you'll keep your eyes open." I laughed her off because I didn't want to question what felt so right. The first cracks were so small I nearly missed them. Jason was glued to his phone more than most people, but he always had an excuse. Work stuff, he'd say, or "it's just Mark, you know how he gets." He was protective of it too, tilting the screen away when I sat beside him. At first, I brushed it off. Everyone deserves privacy, but something about the way he guarded that phone made my stomach tighten. One night, while we were out at dinner, his phone buzzed. He glanced at it quickly, smiled faintly, then flipped it over face down. I teased him, "Who's keeping you smiling like that?" He laughed, leaned across the table, and kissed my hand. "Only you, Claire." I wanted to believe him, so I did. But deep down, the seed of doubt had been planted, and it wouldn't stay buried for long. The seed of doubt didn't take long to grow. Jason was still the same on the surface, sweet, attentive, full of plans about our future, but between those moments, there were gaps I couldn't ignore anymore. It started with his late nights. He began working extra hours more often than usual. Sometimes he'd text me around 9 or 10 p.m. saying, "Still at the office, don't wait up." I wanted to trust him, but his job had never been the kind that demanded late-night emergencies. When I asked why suddenly he was so busy, he'd sigh like I was being unreasonable. "Claire, I'm doing this for us, for the life we keep talking about." The words soothed me, but the tones stung. Then came the secrecy with his phone. It wasn't just tilted screens anymore. He started taking calls in the other room, whispering in a voice low enough that I couldn't catch the words. If I walked in unexpectedly, he'd end the call quickly, smiling as if nothing was wrong. When I asked who it was, his answers were vague. "Just work, just Mark again, always Mark." But when I mentioned it to Hannah one evening, her face tightened. "Claire, he used Mark last week when you told me he stepped out during dinner. Is this Mark a coworker or his imaginary friend?" She meant it as a joke, but her concern was obvious. I brushed it off, telling myself Hannah was being protective. But later that night, as Jason sat beside me on the couch, scrolling through his phone with the screen tilted just out of sight, I couldn't help but wonder if she was right. The red flags piled slowly. One Friday, Jason told me he was having drinks with coworkers after work. Hours later, I texted him to see how it was going. No reply. When he finally answered past midnight, he wrote, "Sorry, my phone died, just got home." But the next morning, when I picked up his jacket to hang it, I found a crumpled receipt in the pocket, 2 glasses of wine. A dessert for two. Not the kind of tab you'd rack up at a noisy bar with colleagues. I confronted him gently. "Were you really with coworkers last night? Because this doesn't look like a group tab." He didn't flinch. He smiled, slipped the paper from my hand, and said, "You're adorable when you're suspicious." That was Mark and me. We split dessert. Don't laugh. He kissed my forehead, changed the subject, and somehow made me feel silly for even asking. That was Jason's gift, turning my doubts into jokes, my questions into quirks. If I pressed too much, he'd sigh, pull me close, and whisper, "Don't ruin what we have with paranoia. You know I love you." And I wanted so badly to believe him that I let his words stitch over the cracks. But my body knew better. My chest grew tighter each time his phone buzzed. My stomach twisted each time he told me not to wait up. The worst part, he started using my love against me. If I questioned him too much, he'd look at me with tired eyes and say, "Claire, you're the only good thing in my life right now. Please don't make me feel like I'm failing you." And every time he said that, guilt swallowed me whole. I'd back off, apologize even, and let him hold me until the unease faded into silence. But the silence didn't last, because underneath the smiles and apologies, something darker was building, and I knew deep down I hadn't seen the worst of it yet. The night I finally saw the truth wasn't explosive. It wasn't the kind of moment you see in movies where the world crashes all at once. It was quieter, more insidious, and maybe that's what made it so devastating. Jason had told me he was going out with Mark again. By now, Mark had become a convenient ghost in our relationship, always present in Jason's excuses, never actually visible in my life. I wanted to trust him, but something in me had stopped buying the story. That evening, Hannah called me out of the blue. "Claire, don't be mad," she said cautiously, "but I just saw Jason." My heart froze. Where? At that new lounge downtown. And Claire, he's not with Mark. I felt my throat tighten. Then who? Her pause told me everything before her words did. He's with a woman. Dark hair, red dress. They're sitting close, too close for coworkers. I don't remember hanging up. I just remember grabbing my keys with shaking hands and driving downtown, my vision blurring as tears built. When I pulled up outside the lounge, my stomach dropped. Through the glass, I saw him immediately. Jason, leaning in, with that same smile he used on me when we first met, only now it was aimed at her. Her hand rested on his arm. His phone sat face down on the table, like it always did with me. And they were laughing, heads tilted toward each other, as if the rest of the world didn't exist. For a moment, I couldn't move. I just stood there on the sidewalk, staring through the window at the man I thought I knew. The man who promised me forever. The man who kissed my forehead and told me not to worry. I pulled out my phone with trembling hands and snapped a photo. It came out grainy, but it was real proof. My chest ached, but alongside the pain came something else, a cold clarity I hadn't felt in months. I didn't storm inside. I didn't want to give him the scene he could later twist into Claire overreacting. Instead, I walked back to my car and sat in the driver's seat, shaking. Tears spilled down my cheeks as I stared at the blurry photo on my phone. The image that shattered the last piece of denial I'd been clinging to. When Jason came home past midnight, he smelled faintly of cologne and wine. He kissed me on the cheek as if nothing had happened, muttering, "Mark says hi." My hands curled into fists at my sides. I wanted to scream, to throw the photo in his face. But I didn't. I smiled faintly and whispered, "Glad you had fun." Because in that moment I knew the game had changed. The next morning, I showed the photo to Hannah. She stared at it, her jaw tightening. "This isn't suspicion anymore. This is betrayal." I nodded, my voice breaking. "He looked me in the eye last night and lied, Hannah. He didn't even flinch." She squeezed my hand. "Then don't play by his rules anymore." That night, lying beside Jason as he slept soundly, I scrolled through the photo again and again. Each time, the shock turned sharper, but so did my resolve. He had betrayed me. He thought I wouldn't see it. He thought I'd stay blind. But I had proof now. And once you see the truth, you can't unsee it. After that night, after the photo burned itself into my phone and my memory, I thought maybe Jason would at least try harder to hide it. Maybe the guilt would make him careful. But instead, something shifted in him. He became reckless. It started with the phone again. Before, he would tilt it away from me, step into the hallway to take calls. Now, he sometimes didn't bother. He'd sit on the couch, texting with the faintest smirk tugging at his lips, fingers flying across the screen. If I walked past, he'd lock it quickly, but not before I caught glimpses, a heart emoji, a late night miss you already, words no coworker would ever send. One Friday, he told me he was going out with Mark and the guys. I nodded, pretending to accept it, but inside, suspicion gnawed at me. Hours later, Hannah texted, "He's here again. Same woman. They're not hiding it." I sat on my bed staring at her message, a mixture of rage and humiliation swirling in my chest. It wasn't just that he was cheating, it was that he was doing it so openly now, confident that I would either never find out or never have the courage to act. When he finally stumbled in, past midnight, smelling of wine and perfume, I asked casually, "Did you have fun with Mark?" He grinned, loosened his tie, and muttered, "Yeah, he's hilarious." Then he kissed me on the forehead, the same forehead he used to kiss with tenderness, and wandered off to bed. I followed, my stomach churning. I wanted to scream. I wanted to drag the truth out of him right there. But instead, I swallowed it because I realized something. He thought my silence was weakness. He thought the more he lied, the more I would bend. But inside me, something else was growing, a steel core, quiet but unbreakable. The escalation didn't stop. At a dinner party with friends, Jason made a cruel little joke at my expense. I had mentioned a trip we were planning, and he cut in with a laugh. "If Claire actually goes through with it. She's great at dreaming, not so great at following through." Everyone chuckled. I forced a smile, cheeks burning, but inside I wanted to disappear. Later, when I told him it hurt me, he rolled his eyes. "Learn to take a joke, Claire. Don't be so sensitive." Humiliation became his weapon. Every time he brushed off my feelings, every time he twisted my doubts into flaws, I felt smaller, but only on the surface. Deep down, I was taking notes. The worst came one night when I stopped by his office unannounced with his favorite takeout. I thought maybe, just maybe, I'd catch him honestly working late. But the office was dark, the cleaning staff already locking up. My chest tightened. I called him. He answered on the third ring, laughter in his voice. "Babe, can't talk, in a meeting. I'll call you later." A meeting in a locked building at 10 p.m. I drove home, parked in front of my apartment, and sat there in the car with my food going cold beside me. My hands shook with fury, but beneath the rage was something sharper: clarity. Jason wasn't just betraying me quietly anymore. He was humiliating me. Every lie was a performance, every dismissal was a test, and he thought I was failing it because I stayed. But what he didn't know was that I wasn't staying out of weakness. I was staying out of strategy. Because if he wanted to play games in the open, then I was going to start planning my own. And when the moment came, his humiliation of me would turn into the very weapon that destroyed him. The night I realized I had reached my breaking point, I was lying beside Jason, staring at the ceiling while he slept soundly. His arm was draped across me like a claim, heavy and suffocating, while my mind replayed every lie he had told: the receipt in his jacket, the phone calls in hushed whispers, the photo of him leaning into another woman. It was all there, flashing like a cruel slideshow, and yet he slept peacefully while I drowned in silence. I couldn't remember the last time I'd slept through the night. My eyes were sunken, my body weak. I called in sick to work twice in 1 week, unable to pull myself out of bed. I wasn't just sad anymore. I felt erased. Every time Jason dismissed my feelings, every time he twisted the truth, it chipped away at me until I no longer recognized the woman in the mirror. One morning, I stood in the bathroom staring at my reflection. My face looked pale, my lips cracked, my eyes hollow. I whispered to myself, "You're disappearing, Claire." And in that moment, I believed it. Hannah showed up that evening unannounced. She took one look at me curled on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, and dropped down beside me. "You can't keep living like this," she said, her voice firm but gentle. Tears welled in my eyes. "He doesn't love me, Hannah. He never did." She grabbed my hand. "No, Claire. He loved the control. He loved the game. But the real you, the you sitting here, that woman deserves more than crumbs." Her words should have lifted me, but instead, they broke me. Because I couldn't stop asking myself, if I deserve more, why wasn't I enough for him? The following days blurred into one another. I went through the motions: work, home, pretending, but I felt like a ghost in my own life. Jason's indifference grew clearer with every passing day. He'd come home late without explanation, brush me off when I asked simple questions, and sometimes not even bother with excuses at all. His silence screamed louder than words, and the lowest point came one night when I tried one last time to reach him. I asked softly, "Do you still love me, Jason?" He didn't even look up from his phone. "Don't be so dramatic, Claire. You're exhausting." Exhausting. The word landed like a slap. I turned away before he could see the tears curling up on my side of the bed, my chest aching so badly I thought I might stop breathing. That night I broke. I cried silently until my pillow was soaked, shaking as his breathing beside me stayed steady, uncaring. Rock bottom wasn't one event. It was this: lying next to someone who had already left me in every way that mattered, pretending I wasn't shattered. And yet, even in that darkness, something inside me refused to die. It showed up in the smallest of ways, like the morning I forced myself out of bed and went for a walk, even though every part of me wanted to stay buried under the blankets. The air was sharp, the world indifferent, but as I stood by the lake watching the ripples spread, I realized the world hadn't stopped just because I had. It showed up in the notebook I began keeping, scribbling down every detail, every lie, every date, every receipt. At first, it was just proof for myself, so I could remember I wasn't imagining this. But the more I wrote, the more it felt like a blueprint for something bigger. And it showed up in Hannah's voice when she said, "One day, Claire, you'll turn this pain into power. And when you do, Jason won't see it coming." Those words stayed with me. Even at my lowest point, when I felt erased, a faint flicker of hope sparked inside me. It whispered that this wasn't the end of my story, that one day the cracks he carved into me would become the lines where I rebuilt myself stronger. And when that day came, Jason would regret ever underestimating me. Rock bottom taught me something I didn't expect. Silence is not the same as surrender. I had spent weeks drowning in Jason's lies, shrinking under his dismissals, questioning my own worth. But somewhere in that collapse, something hardened. The tears began to dry, the guilt began to fade, and in its place came anger, sharp, focused, alive. The shift started with Hannah. She came over one evening with takeout, her way of pulling me out of my isolation. We sat on my couch, boxes of noodles between us, when she finally said what I had been too afraid to admit. "Claire, he's not going to change. He's not going to choose you, but you still get to choose yourself." Her words landed like a spark. I stared at her, my throat tight. And what if I'm too late? What if he's already taken everything from me? Hannah leaned forward, her eyes fierce. "Then take it back. Stop waiting for him to hand you closure. Create your own. Make him regret underestimating you." For the first time in weeks, I felt my spine straighten. She was right. Jason had built his power on my silence, my willingness to forgive, my fear of losing him. But what if I stopped playing by his rules? The next morning, I started small. I stopped asking where he was going. When he told me he was working late, I smiled and kissed his cheek, pretending to believe him. He thought my quiet acceptance meant he still had control, but behind the smile, I was paying attention more closely than ever. I began writing everything down, not just the receipts in the late nights, but the little details. The way his phone buzzed at 2 a.m., the names that popped up on his screen, the dates Hannah had spotted him with the other woman. Each piece was a thread, and together they were weaving a story even he wouldn't be able to deny. At first, gathering proof gave me back some sense of power, but then something else shifted. I started remembering myself, the Claire I was before Jason. I went back to my morning walks by the lake, headphones in, feeling the rhythm of my steps. I reconnected with old friends, laughing in ways I hadn't in months. I even picked up sketching again, a hobby Jason once called a waste of time. The more I did, the less I felt like the ghost he had turned me into. Jason didn't notice the change, or maybe he did, but mistook it for submission. He grew bolder, lazier with his lies. One night, his phone lit up while he was in the shower, and I saw the preview flash across the screen. "Last night was perfect. I can't stop thinking about you." My chest burned, but instead of breaking, I smiled. Proof. Another piece for my growing collection. When I showed Hannah my notes and screenshots, her eyes widened. "Claire, this isn't just suspicion anymore. This is a case. You could tear his entire life apart with this." I shook my head, my voice steady. "I don't want to just tear it apart. I want him to feel it. I want him to know exactly who destroyed the image he hides behind." That night, lying next to him, listening to him breathe easily, while my phone glowed with the evidence of his betrayal, I made a decision. I wasn't going to cry into my pillow anymore. I wasn't going to beg him for answers he'd never give. I was going to fight back. And when I did, Jason wouldn't just lose me. He'd lose the one thing he valued most, the perfect reputation he had built on lies. He had no idea the woman lying beside him wasn't broken anymore. she was planning. Once I made the decision to fight back, everything changed. I still played the role Jason expected, the quiet, forgiving girlfriend who didn't push too hard, but underneath that mask, I was moving carefully, deliberately. Jason thought my silence meant surrender, but it was strategy. Every time his phone buzzed, I noted the time. Every night he claimed to be with Mark, I checked his jacket for receipts. I cross-referenced them with the nights Hannah had spotted him out with that woman. Piece by piece, I built a record that painted the truth more clearly than any confession ever could. Hannah became my closest ally. We met at her apartment late at night, spreading photos and screenshots across her coffee table like puzzle pieces. She leaned back, arms crossed, studying the evidence. Claire, this isn't just proof. This is his undoing. If you show people what we've gathered, he'll never be able to charm his way out of it. Her words sent a thrill through me because she was right. Jason's entire world depended on how others saw him. The loyal boyfriend, the charming partner, the man everyone envied. What he didn't realize was that the same image he polished so carefully was the one I was preparing to shatter. Still, I kept up appearances. When he said he was working late, I kissed him goodbye at the door, smiled, and said, "Don't work too hard." He walked out smug, certain I was still under his control. But as soon as the door shut, I was on my laptop, organizing the folder of evidence that would soon become his downfall. One night, he left his phone unattended for just a moment. My heart pounded as I picked it up, scrolling quickly. The messages were worse than I imagined. Not just one woman, several. Different names, all saved with emojis instead of full contacts. The words were sickeningly familiar. "I miss you. Last night was perfect. I can't wait to see you again." I screenshotted everything by the time he came back into the room. I had already returned the phone to the table and was pretending to flip through a magazine. He didn't notice a thing. That night, as he fell asleep, I lay awake staring into the dark, the evidence now safe in my phone. He thought he had me fooled, thought his lies still worked, but the truth was, the game was already over. He just didn't know it yet. Hannah suggested I confront him directly, but I shook my head. If I do it now, he'll twist it. He'll call me paranoid, insecure. He'll make me doubt myself again. No, I want everyone to see who he really is. I want his mask ripped off in public where he can't hide. The suspense built inside me with every passing day. Each lie he told, each dismissive laugh, each cruel joke only added fuel to the fire. I stopped seeing him as the man I loved and started seeing him as the man I was about to expose. One evening, he invited me to a dinner with friends. The same friends who always admired him, who believed his stories about being the perfect partner. As soon as he mentioned it, something clicked inside me. This would be the stage, the perfect place to show everyone the truth. I spent the next week preparing in silence, organizing the photos, the receipts, the screenshots into a neat folder, printing some out, saving others to my phone, every detail lined up like evidence in a trial. Jason still smiled at me like nothing had changed, still kissed my forehead, still told me he loved me. But now, every word from his mouth only made me smile back sharper. Because what he didn't realize was that while he thought he was playing me, I was already building the moment that would ruin him. And when that moment came, he wouldn't just lose me. He'd lose everything. The night of Jason's downfall looked on the surface like nothing more than a casual dinner. He had arranged to meet a group of friends at a trendy downtown restaurant, the kind of place with warm lighting, soft music, and just enough of an audience to make appearances matter. Jason thrived in these settings, where he could perform the role of perfect boyfriend for everyone to admire, and that was exactly why I chose it. I walked in by his side, smiling as though nothing was wrong, while my purse held the neatly organized folder of receipts, screenshots, and photos I had been collecting for weeks. My heart pounded, but not from fear, from anticipation. Tonight, his act would collapse, not in whispers, not behind closed doors, but in front of everyone who believed him. Dinner began the way it always did. Jason dominated the conversation, spinning stories that painted him as charming, hardworking, devoted. He squeezed my hand under the table, smiling proudly as if I were his prized possession. I smiled back, my mask as polished as his. Halfway through the meal, while laughter filled the table, I cleared my throat. "Actually," I said, my voice steady, "I want to share something." Jason looked at me, amused, confident. "Go ahead, Claire." I reached into my purse and laid the first photo on the table. Jason at the lounge, leaning close to the woman in the red dress. The table went silent. Jason's smile flickered. This, I said clearly, is the man who tells me he's working late. He let out a forced laugh. Claire, this is ridiculous. But I was already sliding more across the table. Screenshots of texts, each one filled with words of intimacy. Last night was perfect. Miss you already. I can't stop thinking about you. The same words he once whispered to me, now copied and pasted into conversations with other women. Gasps rippled through the group. Eyes widened. Forks froze halfway to mouths. Hannah, sitting nearby, leaned forward and said evenly, "She's not exaggerating. This is the truth." Jason's composure cracked. He reached for the papers, desperate, but I pressed my hand down firmly. "No, Jason. Everyone deserves to see this. For months, you've lied to me, humiliated me, and made me doubt myself. But tonight, I want the truth to be louder than your lies." He looked around, searching for an ally, but the faces staring back at him weren't supportive. They were disgusted, disappointed, shocked. Even his closest friend muttered under his breath, "Jesus, Jason," and pushed his chair back. His voice rose, panicked now. "Claire, stop this. You're embarrassing yourself." I stood, my voice calm, steady. "No, Jason, I'm embarrassing you. You built your life on lies. You made me feel crazy for seeing what was right in front of me. But tonight, you don't get to hide anymore." The silence that followed was heavier than any shout. Jason's mask had finally shattered, and everyone at that table could see who he truly was. Gathered my purse, looked him in the eye, and said, "This is the last time you get to lie to me." Then I walked out. Behind me, the voices rose. Whispers, accusations, the sound of Jason trying desperately to salvage what couldn't be saved. But I didn't turn back. Outside, the air was crisp, the city lights sharp against the night. Hannah joined me a moment later, her hand squeezing mine. "You did it, Claire. He's finished." I exhaled deeply, for the first time in months, feeling the weight lift from my chest. Jason had always believed I was weak, too afraid to stand up, too desperate to leave. But in one evening, I had taken back everything he thought he controlled. He had lost me, he had lost his image, and in the end, he had lost the game he thought he was winning. And I walked away, free. Walking out of that restaurant felt like walking out of a prison I hadn't even realized I'd been locked inside. For months, Jason's lies had wrapped around me like chains, tightening with every excuse, every dismissal, every cruel laugh. But the moment I laid the truth bare in front of everyone, the weight lifted. His mask was gone, and with it, the power he thought he had over me. The days that followed were strange, but not in the way I expected. I thought I would feel hollow, broken beyond repair. Instead, I felt something different, lighter, freer. I had cried all my tears already. Now all that was left was space. Space to rebuild, space to breathe, space to remember who I was before Jason tried to erase me. I moved my things out of his place quickly. Packing was hard at first. Every sweater, every photo, every mug carried a memory. But as I taped the boxes shut, I realized something. Those memories weren't his. They were mine. The laughter, the plans, the love I gave, they were all real because I was real. His betrayal couldn't erase that. Hannah helped me move into a small apartment of my own. It wasn't much, one bedroom, secondhand furniture, thin walls, but it was mine. The first night I slept there, I lit a candle, curled under my blanket, and for the first time in months, I wasn't waiting for a door to open, for lies to spill in with the smell of someone else's perfume. The silence was mine, and it was peaceful. Healing didn't happen all at once. Some nights I still woke up with Jason's voice echoing in my head, calling me paranoid or exhausting. Some mornings I caught myself reaching for my phone, half expecting an apology that would never come. But slowly those echoes grew weaker. I filled the silence with my own voice, my own choices, my own life. I took long walks by the lake again, sketchbook in hand. I reconnected with old friends I had drifted away from. I laughed with Hannah until my stomach hurt. I even took a weekend trip by myself, sitting on a cabin porch with a cup of coffee and realizing that solitude didn't feel lonely anymore. It felt like freedom. Jason tried, of course, first with apologies. I made a mistake. I love you. We can fix this. Then with anger, you ruined everything. You're vindictive. You'll regret this. But the truth is, I didn't ruin anything. He did. I only showed the world what he had been hiding. And in the end, the sweetest revenge wasn't the folder of evidence or the public exposure. It was the fact that I walked away whole while he was left scrambling in the ruins of his lies. Because healing, that was my revenge. And if you've ever been where I was, doubting yourself because someone you loved made you feel small, I want you to hear this. You are not crazy. You are not too much. You are not unworthy. The betrayal you suffered says everything about them and nothing about your worth. Jason will carry the stain of his choices forever. But me, I carry the strength of surviving them. And that's a story I'll never let him take from me. Because in the end, he didn't get the last word, I did. And I turned his betrayal into the beginning of a new story, mine. If this story spoke to you, share your thoughts in the comments. Have you ever faced betrayal and found strength on the other side? Your words might give someone else the courage they need. Don't forget to like this video, subscribe, and turn on the notification bell so you never miss the next story. Your support means the world, and it helps me keep telling stories that remind us all, even in our darkest moments, we are stronger than we think. Thank you for listening.